Lesson 9, we're looking at receivables and problems you may have with, they're talking accounts receivable, notes receivable of that nature. If you've gone through the session, you've found in Lesson 9 concepts videos, there's, 6 videos to help you through this. Each video actually covers the information we are going to cover in the answer template. They're pretty good, so make sure you watch those videos. They are located right under, let me get it up here, right under the presentation, and it's on a web page. It shows as a web page. So watch those videos to help you understand some of the concepts. It may explain it a little better than the book does, although the book does a really good job. First question talks about the difference between notes receivable and accounts receivable, and I'll let you ponder that. The book is a really good explanation, and you should be able to pull that answer up fairly quickly. Do not do number 2, and we are now looking at number 3. Now, number 3 is looking at uncollectibles account expense using the percent of sales. There are 3 ways to do this. One is the percent of sales, which looks at the amount of net sales each year. Or you can use an aging method, which looks at the total amount of the accounts receivable that is accumulated over the years. And the final way would be a direct write-off. And each one of those has a different calculation to determine how much your bad debts expense would be, and the allowance count that holds that bad debts. So we're going to look at each one of those. And the net sales is the very first one we look at in number 3 here. And I've given you, or what's listed here, I've actually given you the journal entries, and I've kind of given you some calculations until you get used to this. This particular problem, it gives you how much the sales were, or the revenues were, and it tells you how much of those revenues would be considered bad debts at the end of the year. And I've left that number plugged in here. They just simply want what would be the journal entry to record the revenues, the sales, which you would do here, and then what would be the allowance for uncollectible accounts. And you would find that by taking the 388,000 times the 4%. So they're saying that we have accounts receivable of X, which is 388,000, and we expect to collect a certain amount of that. And I believe at the end of the year, the accounts receivable, okay, was at 35,000, if I'm reading the problem correctly, less what we consider to be uncollectible of that amount. So it's looking at the sales. So we're looking at $388,000 worth of sales, and 4% of that is going to be uncollectible, or that's what we're saying. So if I have accounts receivable of $35,000, the amount that is uncollectible is that $15,520, and that's what they're asking for on the balance sheet. So that's number 4. That's a good explanation of 4. And each year, you would adjust the allowance account as you go down through, because you would take every time you'd have a bad debts, you would deduct from that allowance account. Let's look at number 4. Number 4 uses, let's see, what are we doing with it? It's showing write-offs and the uncollectible account expense. So, and it's using sales also. So first of all, it asks you to record the sales, and they give you a number for that. Then they look at this and they collect a certain amount. So it shows how much they've collected, and you need to record that. And then they write off uncollectibles. Now, here's the allowance for uncollectibles. So you're going to create that, and that's going to be taken out of accounts receivable. And then the following is uncollectible account expense as 3% of revenues. So what are your revenues? Your revenues were, I think it was $422,000. 3% of that is going to be for the new allowance. So that would be an increase here. So this would be $12,600 and $12,600 to set up your allowance. Now you have adjusted the account and you've created a new allowance for uncollectibles. So that's 5. Is there anything else in 5? I don't think so. So it's just kind of giving you brief snippets of how to record these. If you look in the textbook, there's some really good examples, so make sure you follow along in the textbook if you can. And here, you're looking at the number 5. And number 5 looks at, let's see what it says. I'm stuttering a bit because I've got too many papers here in front of me. Number 5 is looking at the aging method. Now, this is the second method, and this is the one I talked about, where you continually reevaluate the entire accounts receivable, just not the net sales. So how you handle this is you look at the entire accounts receivable and you look at the amount that's over 60 days and the amount from 0 to 60 days, and you estimate how much is going to be uncollectible in each one of those periods. And typically this goes out to about 120 days with the percents going up accordingly. So to figure out how much is going to be in your allowance, you would multiply these out and come up with the amount that you would put in the allowance account. Let's see if I can find that in the textbook. And the textbook gives really, I think, excellent examples of. So, once you have completed that, you find out that this should be 1910. So you're shooting for an amount of 1910 here for your allowance. And as you go back up for 1 in 5, you need to adjust the balance to the correct amount. So we have $1,700 in the account prior. We need to have $1,910 in the balance. So what is my adjustment? My adjustment is I need another $210 to go in here. And to get that on the books, after you've done the aging and the analysis of what's there and what you need to have there, then you will come up to here and you will make the adjusting entry, which is going to be this and this. Typically, as you look at this is a little bit confusing. This says uncollectible account expense expense, and this is the allowance. Well, we're increasing the expense. This is also called bad debt expense. So that is a little confusing. But this would be the adjustment you would make to bring that account up to date. So that's 5. And now we are looking at 6, and 6 is looking at a direct write-off. And they're real easy to make because you declare the amount that you're going to write off. And in this case, it was $1,400. Usually you write these off as they happen. So it's a write-off here and here, and it comes directly off of the accounts receivable. And you'll notice that we're not showing we're not showing any allowance account now. We're just saying this is an uncollectible account or a bad debts expense. So they're direct write-offs, and there are disadvantages to using this, because what happens if somebody comes back and pays you, then you're simply going to have to reverse that, but you don't have an allowance account to balance out that difference. And if you take a bad debts at the end of the year, and you've already taken that off your accounts, what happens the next year if somebody comes in and pays you for the account you wrote off? You've already taken that expense, so you can't go back to the prior period. It kind of makes it a bit messy. Now I'm going to end this one here, and then we're going to start up next on 7. But I don't want to make these too long. I want to give you a chance to breathe in between. So we'll end this one, and we'll begin on 7 in the next